Hey y'all, it's Bart. Welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. On this episode, as the first roster of the Berhalter 2.0 era has dropped, we're going to talk about the depth chart for each of the three people on this particular episode of the podcast. We're just going to go through the depth chart, a 3D depth chart, kind of get to like 33 guys, that kind of bigger expanded pool of players to kind of set our, benchmark for, as I said, this Berhalter 2.0 era. So joining me on this episode, we have Thomas, aka US Keeper. Thomas, I'm sure you had a great time copying and pasting all that work you did when you did your 5 deep rosters before the Gold Cup.
Yeah, it's harder than it looks. Give it a try sometime. It's harder than it looks, and your biases come into play with it. So it's a fun exercise for sure.
I do like that you mentioned your biases because I think that's something that I've noticed about U.S. soccer people on Twitter, especially USMNT Twitter chuckleheads sometimes, is they don't realize that they have an inherent bias toward the type of player they want, and they have an inherent bias into the type of style or philosophy of how they should run a team. Anyway, that will play into even our 3D depth chart when we talk about goalkeepers or left backs in particular, about who fits into those second and third positions on this depth chart. The other guy joining us is a coach, a dad, a teacher, a lot of things, but most importantly, a U.S. soccer fan. It's Caleb from at USMNT Corner. Caleb, thanks for joining us. I know you are busy running around with kids in school, kids in soccer.
Club coach, high school coach, dad, player. It's sometimes I can't remember, exactly what I'm supposed to be doing every hour of the day, but it is what it is. Also, USMNT nerd. I prefer USMNT nerd. There's a ton of fans. I think all of us, most of the people that we interact with on Twitter on a day-to-day basis, we are above the fan. We are into the nerd echelon, and I think it's a good thing. It's it's a term of endearment.
Do you consider yourself a sicko?
Oh my gosh, like the kids know, like they can, like my students, like if we're about to do a presentation or PowerPoint or something they don't want to do, they'll just start asking me questions about soccer. Like they know, and I'll just start, go on a tangent. 10, 15 minutes later, I'm like, guys, y'all did it again.
Thomas, are you a nerd or a sicko? Which way do you want to identify?
I'll go with nerd. I think I'm definitely a nerd with it. So
I think I like that because sickos, I'm not the type of person who's going to watch we'll talk about it when we talk about the roster, but Christopher Lund in the second division of Italy, Serie B, I'm not sinking my time into Serie B. I'm just not. I have a finite amount of time in my day, and I'm going to watch the leagues and the teams and the players that I like. And sorry, Serie B is not it. But I definitely nerds, borderline sickos on this podcast. And the exercise we're doing today is definitely a nerdy thing to do. So, like I said, we're going to do a 3D depth chart for each position for the U.S. men's national team. Kind of, again, build that out to about 30 to 33 players. Look at what each position has. And at the end, we'll kind of identify where we see some room for improvement, if you will, which will transition well into discussing the roster that dropped earlier this week for the friendlies coming up in September for the U.S. men's national team. All right, gentlemen, let's start with goalkeeper. And I will go first because my three are pretty, I don't think there's anything really crazy about this. I have Matt Turner as my number one. I have Ethan Horvath as my number two. And then my third is Gaga Slonina. Caleb, what do you have?
Yeah, I'm, pretty much the same. Turner, Horvath, Slonina. With Slonina, I'm not locked in, set in stone. He's super young. I think the potential is the reason we all put him there. And then the third keeper, I would rather go with potential versus, veteran leadership. So that's why I put him in there over a guy like Stefan, Sean Johnson, Great Calendar. That's my rationale there.
I think Stefan, Calendar, Johnson, those guys, Celentano, like there's been a couple of guys that have gotten looks, and I'm with you. I would put Gaga in the squad. I don't necessarily think that he's a better goalkeeper than any of those guys, but after Matt Turner, I don't really care.
Yeah, exactly.
Thomas, you're a goalkeeper. I mean, you have a slightly different set of three.
So yeah, to preface this, the reason for my picks are I'm taking into account the Olympic piece of it. So the only difference I had Turner 1, Horvath 2, and then I had Drake Calendar for the third, with Slonina being with the U23s. I think as camps start to build up for that, we're going to see him be involved in those. So I think, barring the Olympics, he would probably be my third keeper. But in that vein, that's kind of where I looked at it from there.
And again, I think that totally makes sense, because when you're looking at the senior U.S. men's national team, very different than the U20s or the U23s, which obviously we have a tournament coming up next year. But I think the gist is Matt Turner is our number one. Ethan Horvath probably our second choice. And then after that, it's just pick a guy from the list of 6 guys, and it's, there's your third guy. Center backs is a little more interesting. All three of us kind of had the same group-ish. Ranking them is a little hard. And then you consider that, some of these guys can play left or right-sided. I had Richards and Ream as kind of my starting pairing, if you will. Behind them, I had CCV, Miles Robinson, Walker Zimmerman, and Mark McKenzie. Caleb, yours is slightly different, but feels the same.
Yeah, I kind of looked at this whole thing as what am I looking at versus always trying to figure out what do I think Berhalter's going to do. Nobody knows what Berhalter's going to do. We have no idea. So I think I'm done with that. I'm going to look at it what I would do. And I still like Brooks. The fact that he's not in is so stupid, but he's there for me. Ream at the moment, he's still playing at an extremely high level. When you're projecting towards 2026, I don't think he'll be there. He says he wants to be, and more power to him. I mean, that'd be amazing if that could happen. Just, I don't know. But right now, he's there. And then Richards and Miles, I think Richards and Miles probably project as the 2 for the future, the pairing, especially if Miles gets a good move this offseason. And then I have CCV and Walker Zimmerman. The bubble would be, Mark McKenzie, Austin Trusty, Jalen Neal. I think Zimmerman, for me, he stays in there just leadership-wise. I think a lot of people, number one, he's great in the air. He's better than people want to give him credit for just because he plays in MLS. But I think his leadership is something that really sets him apart. So he's still in that group for me.
All right. Well, interesting. Thomas, you had a slightly different order of these guys as well.
Yeah, but so I'll start with the right center back. So it's Richards 1, CCV, and Miles are kind of 1B. I think it all depends on what the form is for those players. And then I think I'm not as high on Ream's on there, but to Caleb's point, I think he's, his days are, I mean, you don't want to think his days are numbered, but he's getting older. So he's there. But I think, McKenzie, Trusty, are going to push him a little bit, in the position there on the left side. But, I think it's going to be interesting too, because obviously Greg mentioned working a 3-back center back situation. So, that's, an interesting piece, because you're going to have different skilled players in that formation. So.
Which, by the way, not to get too nitpicky into that, but like people reacted poorly to that comment as if having a plan for a 4-back and a 3-back set was like a bad thing. So I again, we're finding reasons to be mad when sometimes you need 3 center backs. You just might. And to your point, that does change how you build a back line, because, like, for example, Caleb, I would have put Ream and Brooks in a back 3. That would be slightly problematic, putting 2 slow guys back there. But, would I put Richards, Miles, and CCV back there? I don't know. So that also, we're kind of assuming more of a 4-3-3, but like if you go to 3 center backs, it does change your kind of pecking order.
This is true. And like I said, hey, nobody knows what Berhalter's going to do.
Yeah.
That's going to be our new base formation, by the way, 3-5-2, in case you guys didn't know. He's going to just change it all of a sudden.
Hey, if it gets Balogun and Pulisic in the middle of the field, then hey, that would be fun.
Wishful thinking.
Let's go to right back. Most of us have this. Actually, all three of us, we have the same dude. It's Serginho Dest is our number one. Now, my number two is Joe Scally. My three is Brian Reynolds. Caleb, I think
Yeah,
you have the same.
I have the exact same. Serginho Dest, Joe Scally, and Brian Reynolds. I think the last time we saw Reynolds, he really kind of put himself in there.
Yeah.
Looked really good going forward. A lot of athleticism and I think the third right back spot was kind of up for grabs anyways, and I really think he kind of, obviously I don't know if he submitted himself there, but I think he's probably leading the pack right there for that third spot.
Now, Thomas, you did not have Joe Scally on your right back depth.
I didn't, and in my depth chart, I didn't repeat any players in the positions, and that was almost deliberate a little bit, which makes it a little harder to do that. So, I made it a little hard myself. So, I was going to go with 4 right backs, but it's not the World Cup, so I figured I'd just stick with the rules. So I did go with Dest and then Reynolds and Fossey on there. I kind of want to see Fossey in general. I think he's worth getting an eye on at this point. He's experienced enough where I think he should get a look.
Yeah. I think I agree with you in that. Well, here's where I agree with you. And I think this is what I take from this is none of us had DeAndre Yedlin. And this to me is a very DeAndre Yedlin was slotted into that right back spot for the past 8-12 years. I feel like as a U.S. national team player, certainly since the 2014 cycle. This is really a turning of the page. So who, to your point, fills in that third spot? Fossey's one. There are others that could be there. I mean, we've seen frickin' Julian Gressel played. There's going to be someone who needs to take over that role. But also to kind of Caleb, what you said, Brian Reynolds looked really good in the Gold Cup. And you don't take too much from the competition level we played, but I think what I took was he's ready to be considered as a full squad player.
Yeah, and then to Thomas's point with Marlon Fossey, I'm of the thought that just leave no stone unturned, right? If he looks good, get him in. There's so many opportunities to invite players and get them integrated. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. No big deal.
Yeah.
But at least reward these guys for going to Europe, testing themselves, pushing themselves, and give them an opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'm fine.
A guy playing in the first division of Belgium is worth looking at.
100%.
So, let's move to the left side because again, we all three have the same starting left back. It's Anthony Jedi Robinson. He has been the starter under every coach that we've had the past 8 months, and been the starter under Berhalter. Now, Caleb, you and I have Serginho Dest as our second choice because we did repeat a couple of players in certain positions. Thomas, you have Joe Scally as your second choice.
Yeah, I don't know. Could have gone either way with it. I did change it up a little bit. He initially was on my right back side, but I put him on the left. We've seen him play there with the national team, in the few opportunities he's had. So I think for now, I think that's where he'll slot in.
Yeah.
In general, so.
I think by default, he is the second choice, right? So if you have a starting
lineup,
second
choice out of right. Fullback.
Yeah. If you've got a starting lineup with Jedi on the left and Dest on the right, Scally to me is my second fullback, right? He's the second choice at right. He's the second choice at left. I just have Dest. If Jedi's hurt, I'm going to put Dest on the left and Scally on the right. That's what I would do.
And Dest is playing almost exclusively left back right now for PSV. Now, granted, left back, he and Noah Lang are just doing stuff on the left side. They're just back there. I don't know what they're defending or anything. It's fun to watch. I was about to say, I love to see it.
Exactly. I love to see it. But yeah, I think that's the right call. Technically speaking, he is the second. I think it's where, when we get into the third spot is where we kind of all have our own little
Yeah.
thoughts and biases, right?
Yeah. So Thomas, you have DeJuan Jones. I have DeJuan Jones as that third spot. I thought he was very good in the Gold Cup. I thought he proved to me that he at least deserves to be considered in that left back kind of group. What do you see specifically about like DeJuan Jones that makes you feel comfortable including him in this group of, you know, the top 30 players in this pool?
Yeah, I he showed well. I mean, he shows well at the club. He showed well at the Gold Cup. I thought. I think he's skilled. He attacks and pushes forward. That being said, I think there are players in the wings that are actually naturally left-footed who could push him, but that hasn't happened yet. So there are, and that's the key. Like having a natural left-footed left back is kind of a critical thing, I think, is Scally's not that, and you have a few guys in the wings that can do that, but they have to be able to elevate themselves, to that position. As Clinton would say, hey, you have to go ahead and take that spot. And I do agree with that to a point because, there's opportunity there, and they're young too. I mean, 18, 20, 21-year-olds. I mean, so they have that opportunity to be able to do that. So they also might fall into that Olympic opportunity too. So again, that's also why he's there over someone else that, Gomez or, John Tolkien, type of player.
Now, Caleb, you differentiated from us. You have the Atlanta homegrown Caleb Wiley.
Only because he shares my name. That's the only reason.
That's
no,
It's good enough reason.
it's a great reason, right? I mean, I feel like that's kind of what Berhalter does when he picks rosters sometimes. Just the most random things. Here's the thing. To me, DeJuan Jones, I really like him. I like what he offers, but he is he's a left back out of necessity for club. I think he is a right back that can play left back. And I think the fact that he plays left back primarily is good for him as far as utility goes. But I think he'd be better on the right. It's just what I see.
Yeah.
And then as far as putting Caleb Wiley there, it's kind of the same thought process as the keeper situation, right? If it's your third left back, as far as my depth chart. Now, Thomas has brought up really good points as far as the Olympics. Is, in reality thinking, he's right. That's where Caleb Wiley is probably going to end up being. But I think as far as naturally left-footed left backs go, Gomez, Vines, Wiley, he's probably the most well-rounded. I really appreciate his 1v1 defending. He's dangerous going forward. He's creative. And he's strong. He's a big kid for such a young kid. I think he could do a job. So that's kind of why I've got him there as far as my depth chart, because I see him kind of solidifying himself in the next, 6 months, couple, year or so. And then, someone we're not talking about, George Bello, we saw him do a really good job last summer, I believe it was. Club situation has been
terrible.
Yeah, it's been awful, and I hate that for him because I do feel like he's a talented kid. He's got to move. I hope things turn around for him so he can put his name back in there. But for me, he's just completely out of the situation. Simply, regardless of his talent and his potential, simply because of the club situation.
So here's my question with left back, because this has been, if you followed the U.S. men's national team for more than one camp, that finding a second choice left back is the hardest thing we possibly could do, specifically when we're talking about a left-footed left back. DeJuan Jones is kind of, I know he's not naturally left-footed, but he certainly plays left back for his club almost exclusively. Thomas, do you think that's a priority? Or is it okay? When we went to the World Cup, we took 3 right backs and 1 left back. Does it matter to find that? Is that a priority?
I think it's just a priority, but I think it's something you kind of look at when you're building, positions a little bit too, and you're building formations. Because again, it's partly the skill set too, because how are they going to play? Yeah. So you got to figure, and I think that's the key. When you look at the rosters, and that's not one thing we've even talked about. Obviously we kind of looked like a 4-4-3 formation, but how are they going to play with different opponents? They're going to,
Right.
3 back? Is it 5 back? Or how it is, and how they're going to push up. I mean, I like to watch the outside backs push forward. That's what I want to see. So, but there's a skill set where being right-footed on the left side, that gives you different opportunities and different looks. So it's,
Yeah.
I think there's, I don't know. It's sometimes we get stuck on that a little bit, I think, too, in our heads in terms of what's needed there. It's really, how it's going to be able to fit and how it's going to work with the combination too, with whoever the winger is going to be on that side too.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think because I don't mind a right-footed left back in the sense of like if it's Dest, because if he's going to cut inside, I love that. I like that all day long, but also in combination with, who's playing left wing. If they're going to be occupying the same exact space, like if Pulisic's on the left wing and he's cutting inside and Dest is cutting inside, that could be problematic.
That's a good point of who is playing elsewhere. I mean, who's playing your 6? Is it Tyler Adams or is it James Sands? Because James Sands could just kind of slot back into the center back role.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that, and that's a good point, Thomas. I think a lot of it just depends on who's available. Who are we going to face? What does our, set formation look like? What are our tactics? I think all that kind of comes into play, which is kind of why I looked at just overall talent and potential when I put mine together, because I think when you start getting into the weeds, I mean, especially for people like us that are paying attention to way more than the average fan, so many things factor into these decisions that we are not ultimately making, thank God sometimes, because some of these positions are tight.
Well, you're right. And I think the back line is both settled, but also there's a lot of uncertainty of just who is starting, especially in that center back position. Let's move up the field a little bit, go to the defensive midfield position. Now, we all three have Tyler Adams, but Thomas, you have an interesting list of guys behind him, and not so much interesting because we haven't seen him, but I struggle to find confidence in them in an important game.
Yeah, this was a hard one for me because I mean, we talked about depth at the defensive mid 6. Like it's not there. Like, in general, like, so, and again, in an effort not to reuse a player, I mean, I'm sure Musa would be the ideal backup to Adams in that situation. I just, did not put him in that position. I used Johnny Cardoza and James Sands. Now, mind you, I didn't want to put him there, but I think we lack the depth. There's so many like players, I think, that kind of like are on the fringe, that we've seen a little bit, like, we saw, Keaton Parks, we haven't seen it all, which again, we rack our brains about that one, but
Keaton
like
Parks doesn't exist. What are you talking about?
No, I mean, exactly. I mean, and he plays at a very high level. And that one blows me away. I mean, there's obviously, Amir Robinson, he's a player that could potentially, do national, that could potentially, fill a role. Probably unlikely, but he's 21. And so, Adrian Morris didn't do it. Can Tessman do it? Can Busio do it? Like, in general, like, and there's players that have, fizzled out, I mean, where Daniel Edelman, like he's coming up. He's still 20, Chris Durkin. There's just so many players we've heard over the years, but none of them have been able to find that opportunity to do it, or even gotten that look. So it's very hard. And so that's why my picks there are a little bit unique, because I still think we lack the actual depth there. While Musa can play it, I don't think, I think he's better, in a different position, right? In that, because, but he's proven he can play it. So,
well, and he has. That's why I have him as my second choice at that position. And I do think that is obviously, when we saw this in the Nations League, I think we all kind of thought like that could be a thing that could happen. We kind of had the thought exercise of what does a Musa at the 6 look like. And I kind of thought it would be more of a double pivot, and it really wasn't. So that's kind of why I'm more confident putting him there. That said, I don't think there's anything wrong with changing your formation a little bit if Tyler Adams isn't available. But I have Adams, Musa, Cardoso. I really do like James Sands. I'm just not sure how he stacks up when like the intensity and the level of play rises, because I mean, I had the same question for Cardoso, but Sands was pretty darn good in the Gold Cup, to the point where like I didn't think he was actively hurting the team like Aiden Morris did on a couple of occasions. But I just don't know if Cardoso, Sands, any of those guys, I don't know if I trust them, and I do trust Yunus Musa. Caleb, I feel like you are in a similar boat as me.
I am. I think this is probably, in my opinion at least, one of the most critical positions on the field, right? I'm a former right back and former 6. And, you know, I was obviously no Tyler Adams, but I do understand kind of how things pivot. You know, obviously people use that term for it, but really things pivot upon that position. And when Adams is out, it is, I mean, like so obvious. And I agree. I think when Musa kind of showed he can do it, it made me feel better about using him there if we need to.
Yeah.
Right. Because I feel like we've got more backups at the 8, to where if we pull Musa from the 8, which I agree with you, Thomas, he's better there. But if we could pull him to do the 6, because I think he does a good job, it's easier to fill in a backup 8. Does that make sense? And so that's kind of why I've got him there. But after Tyler Adams and Yunus Musa, I mean, I've got
You have a bunch of
marks.
question marks. Yeah, I'm going to do that when I put this on Twitter, by the way.
Please
I'm going
do.
to just put like 5
Because
question marks.
For me, please do it, because it is true. It is so true for me, because like I've got several of these guys listed on the bubble, right? Busio, he's inconsistent. Cardoso, I mean, ton of potential. We see it, right?
He's
It's
frustrating.
teasing us.
Yeah.
But in a U.S. men's national team kit, I've not seen it yet. Obed Vargas, too young. Tanner Tessman, a lot of potential. I mean, he's got.
Hey, he scored a free kick goal the other day.
It was a golazo. Also, you know, I'm wondering why in the world and how that keeper didn't make that save. But you know what? Hey, he does have a rocket. He has a lot of physical tools. He's a big kid.
Yeah.
And he's doing a job in Europe with, you know, I think in the position he's at with Venezia, it's probably not the greatest situation, and he's still in there doing his thing. So
Yeah.
I think you got to look at that. I'd love to get some looks with him, but you know, you just start throwing people out. Kellen Acosta, right? None of us has even mentioned him, because I think for a while he was probably everybody's backup 6.
Well,
but
wasn't he the only one?
Exactly. He was by default. Like there was no other options. And that's the frustrating part, is you look at the 6 and then you do think about a guy like Keaton Parks. Could he do the job? I don't know, because we've not seen it.
Yeah.
Why in the world, if we have such an issue there, and Tyler Adams has shown that he's not, you know, Jedi, that's for sure. I don't think anybody is, as far as the ability
we're
to.
having this conversation while Tyler Adams is literally injured and not
thank
playing
you.
for his club team. He's
Thank
not
you.
in the friendlies coming up. Like, this
Exactly.
is a serious issue.
And I'm saying that as one of the biggest Tyler Adams fans. But it's a massive issue. So why aren't we talking about Marlon Fossey, keeping no stone unturned? Why are we not bringing these guys in?
Yeah.
We tried Aiden Morris, to your point, Thomas, didn't work. So try somebody else, and again and again and again, until we find someone who can do the job. So that is why I have Musa as my 2, because as of right now, those are the only 2 people, Tyler Adams and Yunus Musa, that I feel very comfortable with if we're facing stiff competition.
Well, and let's move up that field, because as you mentioned, both of you, that there are potentials. If you move Musa to the 6, it just feels like there's more depth at these attacking mid positions. So let's talk about it. I have McKinney and Musa as my starting attacking midfielders. I have Gio Reyna, Luca De La Torre behind them, and then behind that is like a second group of, like, I guess I trust them, and that's Georgi Mihailovic and Malik Tillman. I think the thing for me is Reyna and De La Torre could play at either left or right side, but I would prefer Reyna to be in a more advanced position, similar to McKinney. I would prefer De La Torre to be slightly less advanced, like Musa. Caleb, where do you sit with the attacking mid depth chart?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got Adams, McKennie, and Musa, the MMA midfield, I'm happy with it. I'm fine with it. If Gio Reyna's healthy, I'm okay with an Adams, McKennie, Reyna.
Yeah.
Or a Musa, McKennie, Reyna. Like, I think that's a great problem to have as far as if Reyna's healthy, where he can slot in and play.
And I'll be honest, the reason I don't have, and we'll get to this on the other positions, the reason Reyna's not a starter for me, and I have the same kind of thought process with Josh Sargent, where his position on the depth chart is he's never healthy.
Right.
So I don't want to rely on him as my number one when there are very good players behind him and around him that maybe even are better with the national team than he's ever been, and certainly are more available.
Yeah, I mean, it's so frustrating to see a guy with his, I mean, just his talent, his potential. It is probably the most intriguing as far as if you want to call him a prospect, right? At this point, but it's so frustrating because he can't stay healthy. And we'll talk about Sargent later. Both of these guys just seem to be, I don't know if it's bad luck. I think with Reyna finding out it wasn't necessarily a muscle injury, so that's good. It was kind of like a freak accident with the fracture. At least it's not a pattern, right? If you're having the same injury over and over and over again, that's kind of more of a negative look. But yeah, I agree. It's tough to put him in there.
Yeah.
But as far as after those three, I think McKinney, Reyna, and Musa, everybody has him there. For me, it's De La Torre because he's not done anything wrong to fall out of his spot. And then straight up because of his, sheer potential and his ability to make magical things happen, I've got Malik Tillman in there.
Yeah.
He's got a knack for making things happen. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And he does it. He's done it everywhere he goes.
And then you mentioned a bubble of kind of guys behind that. Who would be your preferred player in that kind of 6 attacking mid spot, if you will?
Yeah, I've got the bubble with Brennan Aronson, Taylor Booth, and Jesus Ferreira. And I've got Jesus Ferreira in there because I see him more as a 10 or an 8 than I do as a forced 9, which he just continues
especially
to get
at the international
shoved.
level. Yeah,
exactly. Especially, if you've got all the first choice guys, why are we forcing him into a role that he doesn't need to play? But I think Brennan Aronson is just one of those pesky, can do the job. Is he first choice? Probably not, but I feel comfortable putting him there if I need to.
Yeah. Now, Thomas, you have basically the same 5 that Caleb listed: McKinney, Musa, Reyna, De La Torre, Tillman. You do list Jesus Ferreira as your 6th option as an attacking mid. And I think this is an interesting conversation because when we saw in the Gold Cup, he did start several games as the striker, but later in the game when we brought on Brandon Vasquez and made some changes, he moved to that midfield position and I thought looked pretty decent. I mean, what did you make of him in that position in the Gold Cup?
He impressed me, and I mean, I don't think he's a 9. He's just not. I think and he's a better passer than I realized. In that, watching that. So I think it's a good, opportunity to bring him in there because I think that the striker. I don't think he's the type of striker against the top tier talent that's going to be able to score. And that's he's scoring goals when he needs to, and so. Against competition, he should be scoring against you. And it's no knock on him. It really isn't. I think he slots better, behind the strikers and being able to run forward and a little bit more free and then cutting in and doing and creating, a little bit more havoc in that attacking third centrally. So.
Yeah, that's kind of the conversation about Ferreira and my point always in that conversation is he's a very talented player. It's just a matter of finding where he actually fits into that system onto the field because I just don't see him as a striker at this level. and nothing against him because I know his movement's decent. He's got good passing and all that. But like, you could put a lot of guys up top and they would score several goals against some of the competition we saw in the Gold Cup. And that's just the unfortunate reality of the CONCACAF competition. But yeah, okay. So I think we all agree that like McKinney, Musa, Reyna are like that starting three that you choose two from, depending on opponent, depending on whatever it is. So that's good. Let's finally get to these attacking players for real. Caleb, you have an interesting right wing trio.
Yeah, I think at right wing, Tim Weah's got that spot. He's got it down for me. Taylor Booth, if he's healthy, think about Booth. He's played all over, and I think he can play all over. Left wing, right wing, attacking mid. I think he could even play the 6 if you wanted him to. This kid, he's just
I'm
super
interested
talented.
to see how he develops. Yeah.
I really do too. And he's so young. Like his final position where he ends up, like for the majority of his career, it might not even be where it's at. But I really, really like where he's at. I think he can put a good ball in from the wing. So I have him right there. And then I've got Balogun there. And it's because I didn't want to put him as the starting striker, the third depth on the left wing and the right wing. I just think he can play, and he has played left, on the right, in the middle. He has that ability. He's extremely technical. He's very quick. So I kind of think it speaks to kind of a lack of depth there, but also to Balogun's utility and his ability to move all over the place. And we've seen his technical abilities. You've put him on either wing, and I think he's perfectly
interesting. I haven't really thought about that because I've identified him as the striker for the U.S. national team. But it's interesting, especially if it's one of those like, hey, we need to get another goal scorer on the field. Maybe you move him out to the right and bring on Pepe, for example, who is a little bit more positionally concrete.
I mean, you've got so many options now, especially since Weah can play fullback, right? So
he's at least a wing back.
If you pull off, let's say you slide Dest to the left and pull Scally off the right and bring Weah down and Balogun. I'm just saying, like, it gives you more options, and then you can throw a Pepe in there who's taller, maybe a little bit better in the box, possibly. I don't. It gives you options, and I like his utility.
All right. Well, Caleb, I don't think you have Balogun listed as a right winger. Who's your 3? Sorry, that's for Thomas. My bad.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, I've got Weah. I mean, I think I mean, Weah's been doing the job. I have Brendan Aronson there, and then I have Booth following that up there. So again, without repeating players, it makes it a little bit more challenging to do that. But I think I think any of those players can perform at a high level and provide energy on the field. I mean, again, Weah has really impressed, and and I was critical, for while he was going through his injuries, several years ago about his ceiling, and I was proven wrong. I'll fully admit that, and I'm glad I'm wrong because he does a lot of exciting things out there, and having him on that wing is going to be fun to watch with whoever he's paired with, essentially, and on the left side.
Well, and I think for me it's Weah. I have Reyna as my second choice right winger just because I want to find another spot to get him on the field if necessary. I have Zendejas as my third option. I don't necessarily have any real belief behind that. It's just more because I haven't seen enough of Taylor Booth to tell me that he's for sure right winger. He does put in a good cross, but I wasn't super impressed. I wasn't super impressed by Zendejas. I just want to see more of Taylor Booth in a U.S. men's jersey before I'm like, yeah, he's my third choice there. And that's really where it is. I think that similar to what we talked about with kind of Jedi, he is your left back, right? Weah is your right winger, and everyone after that is just kind of there. especially when we move to the left side, which we will. There are players, especially now we watch Pulisic play more on that right side for AC Milan. There are players on the right side that could just as easily play right wing as well. So the wingers are a little like Weah is my right winger, but even with Weah, if you needed to, you could put him as a left winger if you had to. Let's move to the left wing though. My three are Christian Pulisic, Brendan Aronson, and Cade Cowell. I still have Cowell up there just because someone's got to be that third choice option, and I'm betting on him to figure out a little bit more as he plays more competitions for the U.S. Caleb, what's your left wing depth chart look like?
So I'm with you. I've got Pulisic and Aronson, but instead of Cowell, I've got Paredes. I think Kevin Paredes is he's a little more technical. I think his decision making in the final third is a little bit better. That's the thing that frustrates me so much about Cowell is his physical tools and his ability to, beat you off the dribble, run in behind are, fantastic. And he puts himself in phenomenal situations and positions all the time. But then his final decision, his final pass, his shot, it's just the decision making in the final third.
Yeah,
it just leaves a lot to be desired, even though his physical gifts are tantalizing. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. He's in my bubble, my left wing bubble. I've got Cade Cowell, Conrad, because still believe in that kid. Hey, he has so
if you're
much
gonna believe in
talent.
Cade Cowell, if I can believe in Cade Cowell, you can believe in.
I can. You know what? And then hey, listen, I don't have it listed, but I'm still. I haven't forgot about Ulianes. That kid, I've just always liked him. But some of these guys, they make the wrong move, whether it's them or their agent or their family or who knows.
Yeah.
So hopefully one day we'll see.
And again, the winger position, there are definite like left and right sided winger perspectives and ways to play it, but a lot of these guys are neither left or right footed. It's just a matter of where they fit best on the field at the given time. Exactly. Thomas, I think your trio kind of speaks to that as well. I mean, you have Pulisic number one, but you have some interesting ones after that.
Yeah, Pulisic number one, obviously. I went with Zendejas. He's left-footed naturally. I kind of want to see him on that side a little bit more. He struggled during the Gold Cup. There's no doubt about that.
But he only played on the right side.
He did only play on the right side, and that's the thing. And so, and here's the thing. You have to fit someone out there. Look, Paredes is my third, but the reason Zendejas is there is because he's only 25, 26 years old. And so do you either want Christian Roldan, Jordan Morris, Paul Arriola? I don't think so. We have to still rely on some of these, again, these bridge players, while some of these other players come through and take that opportunity, because you can't write them off. And I think part of it was maybe the talent that was around him in the Gold Cup wasn't to his skill level or comfortability getting the balls and the right stuff, and he was clearly forcing himself. But that's that's kind of why he's there for me.
I think you make a great point. You talk about forcing himself, and for people that have never played, or maybe they've played but they've never struggled with the mental side of the game, I have a soft spot for that, because I know exactly what it's like to struggle on the field because of the mental side of the game. And I think, and I've done it on both ends of the spectrum, but he's probably looking at himself in the Gold Cup as the guy who needs to make things happen. And he was forcing things and trying things that he probably shouldn't have tried, and it didn't come off, and he struggled. He looked bad. But I don't think it's because he can't play, And so, like I said, because I've experienced that kind of thing, so I have a soft spot for those. So I don't want to write him off, even though I don't have him in any of my lists. But I fully agree with you, Thomas. I think because of his age, some of the guys that we've listed are very young. They're probably still U20, U23 type prospects. If we are looking at real senior national team, I do think he's probably somewhere in there. So yeah.
I think that's fair, right? To your point, Thomas, if we are looking at Kevin Paredes, even a Paxton Aronson, Cade Cowell, these guys who have been a part of youth national team setups for a while, I don't trust any of them right now to go play a senior national team game, like in a meaningful game, you know. So Zendejas, does he at least provide that? Maybe, and that's the role he can play right now. Let's move on to the final position, our striker position. Now, I don't want to speak for you all, but I think we all have Jesus Ferreira as the number one, right?
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's Valerian Balogun. He's the number one. I think. I mean, I'm just going to speak for myself here. He proved why he should be that in the Nations League, with even as little time as he had with the team under an interim head coach, and scores a goal, impacts play very well. You see him scoring. He just got a big move to Monaco. He's in a higher league than anyone else, plus scoring in that. Well, at least last year he was scoring in Ligue 1, which is much higher competition than anyone else in our striker depth chart. It's just got to be Balogun, right? I mean, that's got to be the guy. Behind him, I have Pepe and then I have Sargent. Now, I will be the first to say I don't care. Like, I think they're both very good. You can put one at the, if Balogun's not ready, you can put either one there, and I don't really care. The only reason I'm listing Pepe is ahead of Sargent is Ricardo Pepe has this thing called health and durability, and he seems to be available. And availability is sometimes a much better characteristic than skill when, it's like that. But I also think Pepe's pretty darn good. So, again, I have Balogun, Pepe, Sargent. Caleb, I think you're the same.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this one's hard, and just peek behind the curtain. I think we're all in agreement here. Balogun, we saw what he can do. I mean, just even in his first appearance, you could just see that this guy's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his technical ability, his movement off the ball, his ability to finish. He's a special player, and yeah, he's number one. And then Pepe, Sargent, again, I'm going to echo you, whether it's Sargent Pepe, Sargent. I don't care if Josh is healthy. I will lean Josh Sargent.
Okay.
Just because I think if we're going to press and we're going to be on the front foot, I think he presses better than Pepe. So that's why he gets the edge for me.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, if you can't stay healthy, it's really hard to use.
And it sucks, right? Because we're having the same issue with Gio, where you could put Gio as a starting attacking mid and be like, yeah, that's our dude. But you're not there. It doesn't really matter.
It's so frustrating. And it seems like Josh, between USMNT windows, like he's on fire, right? And he's playing great. And then it's like a week before call up, dude gets hurt. And and the frustrating thing about Josh is this past injury, he got hurt, scored a freaking goal. Like it's just so frustrating, especially being a fan of his for as long as I have been, even with his Werder Bremen days and struggling and playing right back, right, like all these terrible moments that he's been through. And then to see him turn it around and kind of almost catch fire, and then boom, he gets hurt again right before. So yeah, but he's still there. He's still there for me.
Thomas, look, I don't think you have any different than us, but I think my question to you would be, you have Balogun, Pepe, Sargent listed, but now that the reality is Sargent is not healthy, we see in this roster that Berhalter selected, he only had Balogun and Pepe. So in his mind, and I think Berhalter, even in this roster, has proven that he'll bring in an extra player or two. Is there anyone behind Sargent that's even worth giving a look to in camps like this? Like legitimately, when you have Balogun and Pepe also there?
Probably not. I mean, Haji Wright is always, one that's, there. And, he's, again, always got to keep your eye on him. Vasquez, again, keep your eye on him. Pifok, he's getting a little older and a little further away from the national team.
Yeah.
I mean, the one player that, again, it's a health issue is DK. I kind of want to see this player, get a couple, seasons underneath him and see if he can get that skill there. But I'm skeptical that he's just not going to be able to remain healthy. And, so, I mean, you have that. And then the thing is, you have Weah who could play that position if you needed to, in a camp situation. So, I think it's, camps and tournaments are a little bit different. You know, you have a little bit more flexibility, so you can try different things out. But I mean, I think it's clear cut that, you know, Balogun and Pepe are just the 1-2 right now. I mean, I to Caleb's point, I love Sargent, but like you got to be healthy all the time, and especially when the national team is coming together. So
yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing with Josh Sargent is he just can't stay healthy. All right, well, gentlemen, we did our 3D depth chart. That's awesome. Good for us. Are there any positions that you feel? Let's put it this way: which position do you feel the most need to better identify the backups right now? Thomas, which one do you think is the most like priority?
I'm gonna go with the 6, defensive mid. I think that's been an issue for a while. I mean, one, because Adams can't stay healthy, right?
Yep.
Consistently. And 2, it also depends on how they're going to play, and that's the other thing. Are they going to play double pivot? Are they going to, play just
if you go to a 3-back system, you're probably not playing 3 full true midfielders. Not in the way that we play it.
Exactly. So I think you have to figure out what that looks like and find those, give them the opportunities, right? Musa can do it. And I think a lot of people will be like, fine, Musa's going to do it, McKennie and Reyno. Okay, there you go. Then that's, people are okay with that. And I think ideally that's probably what it'd be if Adams isn't there. But I still think you need to find, that other player. And again, I know a lot of Cardoso is one of those players. I know there's a lot of high, people high on him, but like, I just don't think he hasn't had that opportunity. It was disappointing. He didn't get the transfer. He missed the Gold Cup, and I think the Gold Cup would have been a good opportunity for him to be able to integrate himself more with the team, because he's getting those first team call ups still. So someone sees something in him, right? And so, but we haven't seen it on the field. That's the problem, and that's where a lot of people are like, well, he can't do it. So I hope he gets the opportunity in this camp. I mean, it's the opponents aren't overly difficult. So hopefully he, will be able to get that start at least in one of the matches.
Yeah, I think that's the goal with this camp, and we'll talk about the roster in a little bit. But there are positions where you can start someone who is more battling for that backup role, or even sometimes a starting role, to give them some confidence here. Caleb, which position do you think is the least unsettled at the starters position?
With the start, I think probably center back, just because, I mean, you've got all the potential of Chris Richards struggling to find playing time. He's had some injury knocks.
Possibly on a move.
Could be. I hope he does get a move somewhere where they want to play him as a starter. You have Miles Robinson, who everybody seems to, just hate on him because he plays in MLS, even though he's shown time and time again that he can do the job. Then you've got guys like Ream, who has an age issue. So I'd say that's probably the most unsettled, which really is kind of alarming, because you'd love to have 2 center backs.
Is it alarming, or is it just because we have a lot of really good, do you get what I'm saying? Because during qualifying, it was basically, we had Zimmerman, Richards, and
I think that's
Robinson.
a blessing. I think that's a blessing. The fact that we do have a lot of talented guys who can fill the position. I think it's alarming that we don't have 2 guys that we can just say, there are 2 guys, and there always are 2 guys. There's always some sort of injury. There's always some sort of playing time issue. There's always some sort of he doesn't get called in because the coach doesn't like him. There's just, we can't ever seem to have a string of, like, I would love to go back, and Thomas, maybe you have this somewhere in all your stats, but like, what's the longest string of games with the same center back pairing? Because I would venture to say it's probably not a large string of games. So that's what's alarming to me. But I do, to your point, fortunately, we've got guys that are talented enough, they can do the job. I would just love for my pairing to know each other and the way each other plays step for step, because they have the time together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
no,
that's
I totally
that's where
get
I'm
you.
at. Yeah.
I don't know if I agree that it's well. I mean, I agree that it's not settled. I just don't know if it's that big of a deal because I think we have 3 to 4 guys who all kind of fit that very well. And that's just kind of where I'm at. Is like, hey, they're all good. Like to me, I would put Richards and Robinson just because like those are the 2 guys I feel the most confident with. I think they complement each other very well.
Same.
And but if it's Ream and Richards, fantastic. If it's Ream and CCV, great. If it's Richards and CCV, fantastic. Like,
I'm not saying I think it's the problem. I think the problem is the 6, right? We talked about the 6. That's where the issue is. I just say unsettled because it isn't like
it is. No, it's
you
not,
look
I
at
agree.
you look at left back. I mean, it's set in stone, right? You look
You
at
have
left
Jedi.
wing.
That's it.
Yeah, Balogun. Like there are so many positions you can look at, and you're just like you don't really even have to think about it.
Yeah.
With center back, you're like, well, who's healthy? Who's Greg mad at this week? Who like you gotta look at all these things. So
who's
that's
healthy? Because Lord, Chris Richards has that issue too. Well, gents, we got through the 3D depth chart. We've got somewhere between 30 and 33 players. This to me just feels like the right amount of people to really truly consider. And this is where, when we talk about the rosters, people get really mad over even the third choice after the second choice. To me, so we're looking at maybe spots 1 through 4 that really, in some of these positions, are being contested. But as you pointed out, left back after Jedi, it's really just pick a person, and we have if Jedi's not playing, we're screwed regardless, right? It's probably Dest, but like it's not great. The point is, we argue a lot about these peripheral players, and I agree that they matter, but they're not mattering in the way that, like, once you get past a certain level, it's not ideal. It's not great. So at that point, we're just choosing the least problematic. And I think when you look at this depth chart, it's very clear that we have a set 11 to 13 players that were like, yeah, these are the guys who we're starting. That said, let's wrap this up and move on to the September roster. We have a roster for 2 friendlies. We will be playing Uzbekistan and Oman. Uzbekistan on September 9th. That is a Saturday at 5:30, and then we play Oman on Tuesday the 12th at 8:30. Now, Thomas, I'm going to let you do your stats thing here. These are pretty historic games for the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, so they haven't played either nation before, so I think it's 103, 104 in terms of first time playing opponent, and we haven't played a lot of teams from the AFC Confederation. And so on home soil, I think it's going to be the 20th and 21st matches for those Asian nations playing on American soil, which is kind of a cool thing because we don't see it very often.
Yeah. That's weird. I just feel like AFC is a good kind of corollary to CONCACAF a lot of times.
Yeah, for tournaments maybe more. We definitely would see China, South Korea a lot early on, and but yeah, it's nice to see. I mean, I look, the opponent quality has gotten some criticism, but I'd rather see them play these opponents than CONCACAF teams, right? Like,
well, and the opponent quality is like, I don't want to say it's easily explained away, but let's be real honest. We can't choose from UEFA because they're playing Euro qualifiers. CONMEBOL is starting their World Cup qualifiers. Africa's doing, I think, AFCON qualifiers. They're all doing some sort of competitive thing right now. So the Asian nations are the only ones available to us, right?
That's the thing. Oh, and I don't think there had been talk about playing a European camp, but I think with Greg Berhalter coming back, I think they wanted to try to give him that boost at home and lift it up there. So that's fine. I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm excited to see them go out there, and it's been since the summer. So,
well, let's compare our depth charts to the ones that Greg Berhalter selected. And again, we have to caveat this, but there's several players that are missing, and we'll kind of talk about them by position group. But let's start with goalkeepers. We have, in alphabetical order, Drake Callender from Inter Miami, Ethan Horvath from Nottingham Forest, and Matt Turner, also from Nottingham Forest. I want to just say that I think my take on Callender, and Thomas, see if you agree with this or not. Sean Johnson was the like third choice goalkeeper because MLS dude proved that he's very good as a starter in a league, which is can't say that for Stefan or Horvath. You know, we're just now getting to that point where we can maybe say that about Gaga. But you got to have one guy who's a domestic goalkeeper because you got to have someone who can be the number one, to be that guy when you have a domestic base camp, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so you don't have a huge amount of options with that, but I think I think there's there might be something to the fact that with a Inter Miami situation with Messi, to maybe get some fans in the seat in general. I mean, I don't think. I mean, you could, there's another, you could have gone Celentano, you could have gone Chris Brady, as kind of options, possibly, those players could have, been brought in, but I think, Calendar's gotten some looks, on the rosters, these provisional rosters this summer. So it's not a huge surprise on that. At 25, I think it's time. I mean, I think we've seen enough of Sean Johnson. He's 34 and he's definitely on the decline there. So
yeah, he's listed as kind of an injured player. But Caleb, I mean, do you think that Calendar is basically kind of replacing Sean Johnson as the MLS goalkeeper in the kind of group?
Yeah, I mean, Sean Johnson got his World Cup, right? And
good for him.
And good for you, dude. I mean, that's awesome. It's an accomplishment, and it's not like he was never like a trash keeper. Like, oh, I can't believe he's in it. Like, he paid his dues. Again, we're talking about a third keeper. But thank you for your service. And
he still only had one goal total conceded on him in his entire USMNT career.
And again, like, I like the guy, but you've got to find more youth and someone who has more potential that if he does have to step in. And I think Drake Calendar has proven himself that he can do a job.
Yeah. Now the next question, and this is I don't want to spend too much time on goalkeepers, but Thomas and Caleb both. Do you play someone other than Turner in either of these matches, or is it just Turner for both of them? Thomas, what do you think?
Normally I would say you play Turner in both of them. But he's getting regular time, and so maybe you throw Ethan Horvath a bone there and give him a start in one of the matches.
You started both Turner in both matches there, Caleb?
Yeah, I'm starting Turner in both matches just because if he's your one, you go with him. But I do understand and appreciate the point Thomas just made. Like, if they do that, I'm not yelling about it,
Fair enough. Let's move up the field to defenders. We have in alphabetical order Sergiño Dest, new club now, PSV Eindhoven. Christopher Lund from Palermo. He's a new face, a new name, and we'll talk a little bit about him. Mark McKenzie from Genk. Kevin Paredes listed as a defender from Wolfsburg. Tim Reen from Fulham. Chris Richards, currently with Crystal Palace, rumored to be on the move. Anthony Robinson, also with Fulham. Miles Robinson from Atlanta United, and Joe Scally from Borussia Mönchengladbach. The only surprise for me is Christopher Lund. Even Paredes, I didn't have him on the list, but that's not a surprise. I'm not fully ready to make him like a senior national team player. Caleb, what do you know about this Christopher Lund guy? I mean, you're an expert in Scandinavians playing in the Italian second division, right?
Yeah, actually, because I'm Scandinavian myself. No, I know he's a left-footed, left-sided player. I'm interested to see, because we talked about depth chart on the left side. Can we get a guy who is dominant left to play on the left, who can come in and do a job? Is he creative? How is he 1v1? Like, I'm very interested to see this guy. I can't say that I've watched him. Anybody who's like, oh yeah, I watch him all the time, shut up. Like, come on, please. But and you know what? Maybe people do. But like you said, I've got a life. I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, I'm not sitting here watching a dual nap that hasn't ever been cat for us in the second division of Italy.
Exactly.
Thomas, anything from this defender group that you want to talk about?
No, I think it's pretty standard. The Lund one is the only thing. I mean, his name was familiar to me. That was it. He's only because he's a dual national. Maybe he hit the radar for me. That was it. So I don't know anything about him. So, but I like to call in. I mean, look, these are the camps you got to call these sorts of players in. it's a culture thing. It's, if he's a dual national, he's considering coming over. I think you need to bring players into the camps and introduce them to that and show them the culture of the team, right? It's a very different group, and a lot of senior players now on this that have been through a World Cup. Bring them in, wine and dine them. If it doesn't work, great, but at least you put the effort into it, and you're trying to do that, and that's the unique opportunity the U.S. has with dual national. So
yeah. So Christopher Lund, Danish American dual national. We'll see. I mean, I don't expect to again. Jedi's here. He's your starter. I don't necessarily think this means anything for the shakeup of the left back depth chart. It's just a guy you called in. Midfielders: Johnny Cardoso from Internacional in Brazil, Ben Cramashi from Inter Miami, Luca De La Torre from Celta Vigo, Weston McKennie still at Juventus. They tried to get rid of him. He's still there. Yunus Musa now with AC Milan, and Malik Tillman, which apparently it's Malik, not Malik, from PSV Eindhoven. He actually played in those UCL qualifiers. I did want to mention that. PSV Eindhoven, which has 3 Americans, going to be playing in Champions League this season, as well as Royal Antwerp, which has Sam Vines. So congrats to those guys. That's pretty awesome. Again, you notice that Tyler Adams not listed here, Gio Reyna not listed here. Some other players Georgi Mihailovic. I didn't think that, I'm not one way or the other pressed about it, but I do think this is an interesting group of players. But to your point, Thomas, in a camp like this, against opponents that aren't going to be incredibly difficult, we should beat them. It's kind of fine when you see that you have McKennie and Musa, De La Torre. Anyone after that is just in camp to kind of get to know things, right?
And that's the whole thing. I mean, you have to use these camps to bring in some of these younger players to introduce them, because the problem is Greg talks out of both sides of his mouth. Well, they haven't experience with the national team. Well, whose fault is that?
Yeah, right.
You're the manager. You can bring these players in or not. You don't have to bring 23 players in. You can bring in 25, 26, 28 players. Doesn't mean they make the game day roster, but they get the experience. Figure out how to run a practice, a camp with more than 23 players in it. It's you have to be able to do that, I think, with some of these these younger players, to introduce them to the national team, because if that's always going to be your excuse, then you're just chasing your tail on this, and this is the opportunity where the exposure can be done, and especially in a year you don't have to qualify. You should be bringing in 2 or 3 players every camp that trying to introduce into the national team.
Well, and one of those, Caleb, is Ben Hameen Kramaski from Inter Miami, Argentinian American dual national. Rumors been coming out that he's actually, I don't even think it's rumors. He's said it as much, that he and Messi been talking about playing for Argentina. Obviously, they've got the best recruiting tool there in Miami, because it's Inter Messi right now. Is this is clearly a play to get a dual national recruiting kit, right? This is what we're trying to do here. Is that bad?
No, I don't think it's bad. I mean, it's dumb not to call them out. Like Thomas said, you got to call guys in, you got to turn stones over, you've got to figure out what you've got, and it'd be stupid to just let this kid leave, right? Now, as far as him talking to Messi, right? Messi can tell me to go jump out of my second story, window in my house, and I'm probably going to think about it, at least. Messi told me to do it. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, I don't know. That doesn't sound good.
The greatest ever just told me to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Messi, he carries a little bit more weight here. And you got to think, this kid has probably grown up idolizing him, and he's saying you should go play for Argentina. Okay. Is he thinking about the fact that you're going to go play for Argentina and never play, buddy? You'll never play.
Right.
So hopefully he understands, and he's got people telling him that. He's got people in his camp that are giving him good advice, and he's going to come into the U.S. camp and see how things are run. And maybe he does continue to progress, because he's shown he can play. He's not there yet, obviously. But you use a spot and call him in. Absolutely. You'd be stupid not to.
Yeah. I mean, look, Thomas, he's got 32 appearances for Inter Miami, only 2 goals, but do you agree? Just why would you not call a guy in like this?
Yeah, I love the call in for it. You know what I mean? I think you have to you have to, again, consume these players, to do that. And again, he's getting minutes in MLS. And so, that's
he's a legit starter on
right.
like Miami has significantly increased their talent level in the past month, and he's still starting.
Well, that's the thing. So, I mean, I think that's a testament to those sorts of things. I mean, not calling him in would be where the fail is. And so I think, for as much as, I say joke, but we talk about the MLS bias, which there really isn't one, but I mean, there's a bias, it's not a quota, excuse me. Definitely a bias. You've got to be calling these players in, right? If they're doing that. Like, I mean, No Buck from the Revolution, he's a player, I guess Greg spoke with him, but those are the players you've got to be talking to and finding opportunities to get them into camps and see them, because they're playing at high levels in the MLS at a young age. And so while you're have that that reach in when they're on domestic soil before they go to Europe, have those conversations, bring them in and do that. And I love to see it, because I think those are things that excite the fan base, right? Not seeing Paul Arriola for the the 50th time, right? Like they want to see some of these young talented players.
Christian
involved.
Roldan listed as injured for this camp, and I was going, oh man, we're even still talking about this dude. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Let's finalize this. We got the forwards. Brendan Aronson now with Union Berlin, and Champions League club, by the way. Valerian Balogun, when this was released, he was with Arsenal, but he's now with AS Monaco down in France. Well, technically in Monaco, but in the French legal. Cade Cowell with San Jose. Ricardo Pepi also with PSV Eindhoven. Christian Pulisic with AC Milan, his new club, and Tim Weah with Juventus, his new club, and he's starting and playing, which is different than Mr. Weston McKennie. I don't think there's anything shocking about this. I think there's been some consternation, and there's even some consternation in my Twitter group chat about Cade Cowell. I don't know of anyone else that I'm like, yeah, this guy definitely deserves a call up over Cowell, especially when you get into like some injuries. And I don't know how to be angry about this group.
Yeah, I don't mind the group. Cade Cowell, I'm actually glad he's in here, and the reason for that is because he surround him with some of the top talent in the pool. Mm-hmm. See what rubs off on him, right? I think he's going to be moving here shortly, which is going to be needed for him a little bit. The guy, I think he's for him in his mind, maybe he's hit the ceiling in the MLS, even though he hasn't had the greatest season. I think he needs a little bit more technical ability, better touch, decision making, as we've discussed, in this podcast and other ones. But I think it's good to surround him with this group. Yeah. Again, there are not a lot of options. I mean, you could have brought in Zendejas, I guess, but I
think he might be injured.
Yeah, he might be injured. I
don't remember if he was listed or not.
Yeah, he played last weekend, so it's on the fence on that, but it doesn't really matter. But I think it's fine. I think it's fine on this. It's good to get. Again, he's 19. I say it a lot of time. He's 19. Like so it's okay. It's okay. That he's not, burning it up. He's got to learn and work through that.
We got spoiled with the Pulisics and the Weahs and all these guys who at 19, 20 years old are starting for big clubs. Not everyone. That's not true for everyone. That's certainly not true for most U.S. soccer players. Last question about this forward group, because it's very similar to the one I asked about the goalkeepers. I think you and I both agree Valerian Balogun's number one. Do you start him for both matches? Do you play him all 90? But I mean, what do you see the minutes distribution of Balogun and Pepi?
Well, if they're talking about three backs, maybe you play them together. One up. You know what I mean? I almost want to see that a little bit too, because we think about when's the last time we played two strikers up top. I'd have to go back and look, honestly.
In a intended formation,
right?
Not oh my gosh, we just got to get players up.
I mean, maybe Bobby Wood, Josie, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe something like that. I don't. I'd have to go back and look, because it's not something. It's not a formation
they
play.
Something Berhalter has even played, because when we've done a 3-back, it's usually like a 3-4-3.
Right. Exactly. So it's worth trying it even for a half, right? This is what it's for. So. Selfishly, I want to see Balogun start both, because I want to see more of him.
I think I would start him in both, but I'm with you. I just maybe you give Sargent Sergeant, gosh, Pepe, 20 minutes in each, 30 minutes in each. I don't know. What
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah, maybe. Again, yeah, I mean, they're both exciting players to watch. They're fun to watch, and to see them with the national team, I'm excited to just see that piece of it and see how they build that continuity, because that's the one thing with Balogun. He hasn't been in a lot of camps, right? He's been in one other one, right? So to do that, I think is going to be
He
important.
hasn't been under a Berhalter camp either. So like,
Well, exactly.
This is the thing, that's where I'm at, is you need to start him because he needs to play with Berhalter as much as possible. But look, we went a whole month without being able to watch U.S. men's soccer, and really the women's soccer that we had to watch during that month wasn't particularly enjoyable either. So we get to watch some hopefully enjoyable U.S. men's soccer for sure this month. These two friendlies, I don't expect much to learn much, but I think just getting the guys out there, getting the first team, this feels like the preferred squad of available players for the most part. That to me is the most important thing we're going to, quote, learn from this pair of friendlies we have.
Yeah, I mean, it really, even though it's not the case, obviously, but you're kind of turn the page. This is kind of the start of the cycle, really. Because, Greg's
Truly
back.
the start of the cycle. I hate the Gold Cup because it doesn't feel like a real start to a new cycle because of the odd year. But yeah, Greg's back. So
right, Greg's back. So and that's the thesis, piece of going to see. And so my fear with Greg coming back, though, while the roster looks great, he's looking to try new things. When the rubber hits the road, they always go back to what they're comfortable with, right? Yeah. When it matters. So it's I expect to see this sort of thing even through the Nation League in November. But what's gonna really where it's gonna come to a test is Copa America.
Yeah,
what it looks like there.
And that I think you do raise a good point, though, because we do have Nations League in November. We'll have a 2-legged tie against whoever gets out of the group, the second place team in the group. These 4 friendlies we have, these 2 against Oman and Uzbekistan, and then the 2 in October against Ghana and Germany, definitely steps up. Hopefully Greg is able to both try new players, but also solidify on his preferred, 11 to 15. And we do see some new-ish faces. I mean, a lot of these guys, as we talked about last cycle ad nauseum, they're young. I mean, most of these guys are still under 26. So I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of changes in what he would prefer, but I do want to see him find those second and third choice guys who are different than what we had last cycle.
Yeah, I think it's going to be critical when we're talking about like substitutions, right? Like,
absolutely.
The combinations of players he brings in, if you're tied in a match or even ahead in the match, what are you going to do to be able to, get the go-ahead goal or hold that lead to get the win. So I think that's going to be, I think against Germany, I think that'll be good, good opportunity to do that and build, kind of build that, because this is it, man. You cannot miss a step here. You've got to hit it all along the way.
Yeah, every camp is important, and so while these matches themselves are not vital in terms of like learning new things necessarily. Granted, if he's talking about possibly, having a 3-back system, that is good. But every camp is important to make sure that you're getting a full understanding of the player pool and making yourself attuned to every single advantage you can possibly get from this cycle, because I don't think he did a good enough job of that last time around. And like you said, he kind of just fell back into what was comfortable, not necessarily what was going to press our advantages the best.
Yeah, and I think when you look at like, when he was gone, how they played the Nations League as opposed to how they played the Gold Cup. Now, mind you, different player pools, but one was much more attacking and free-flowing type of play, where the other one was pretty much Berhalter ball, right? Yeah. Playing out of the back. And so, again, could be player pools, but I think we've got to see more of that free-flowing play and less of the rigidness.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for talking with me so long about all the players that we have in this U.S. men's national team pool. I mean, I feel like we've talked about a lot of names that gets confusing, but it's good to know where we stand and where they stand. So thanks again for joining me. Make sure you follow Thomas at USKeeper on Twitter.
Thanks for having me, and excited for the matches next week.
Yeah, again, we get to watch U.S. soccer. It's great. You can follow Caleb at USMNT Corner. Thanks, Caleb, for joining. Thank you all for listening. Do not forget to subscribe to Soccer Down Here for all of the daily coverage that we provide. And if you feel so inclined, support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/SoccerForUsPod. I'm Bart. I'm out.